When you think you might burst with joy, who do you reach out to? When you wonder why our planet is threatened and no one seems to care, who do you call? When you want to dance with gratitude, who is your partner? In the last decade or so, finding the names to answer these questions has become troublesome and also exhilarating for me. How about you? This exact weekend last month, I was in Durham, North Carolina at the congregation where I first became part of Unitarian Universalism. I had attended other congregations a few times. However, it was at Eno River that I took the risk of connections, and I discovered a different kind of friendship. I discovered what the choir told us so beautifully, that I had more friends than I knew. And at that point in my life, I really didn't know that I had any. I discovered friendship with people that I would have otherwise decided that I had nothing in common with. And one of the great joys of my trip last month was to be able to pick right back up and start connecting again with people I hadn't seen for years, to thank some of them, to mourn some of them, and to meet the people who are now their friends, like this great widening set of circles. Deeper friendships and a deeper relationship with solitude, well, that's for another Sunday, are the sweetest fruits of a rigorous decade for me. And I know many of you know how that feels. Knowing who we can call when a new idea comes up, a new achievement is met, a new heartbreak happens. It's a good feeling because we are essentially social creatures. We're only a few years into from the months of separation that made us long for family, biological and chosen in a physical sense. And those times also, I think, raised huge questions about our other connections to truth, to our ideals, and about what frames of meaning make sense in such a confusing world. Now, many traditions honor this special kind of friendships, the kinds that can step into this gap. Buddhist teacher and author Kate Johnson reminds us that the Buddha called them spiritual friendships, or kalyamita, and said it began with honest and deep engagement with not another, but in fact with ourselves. Now, how important is this? Insight meditation teacher Tara Brach said, if we threw away all the spiritual paths in the world and all we paid attention to was cultivating that quality of friendliness, everything else would come out of that. Seems like a good starting point for our congregation in this time of reemergence and redirection. I know for me that knowing who I can talk to when I'm doubting myself, or perhaps I've made a mistake, as we all do, who will celebrate with me the strange things I sometimes see as victories that others might not. For example, learning to texture walls, or kinda, or feeling elated about spending 3 days in silence writing about traumatic experience at a monastery. Or giddy because I get to go to worship last Sunday with 20 California quail up close and personal. And because I was not in cell range for that one, I had to send my spiritual friends a picture of that one. I don't reach out to the same person for all of these things. The person who might get excited as I am that some progress was made, for example, on the Oceans Treaty this week, is not the same person who will be as excited about the fact that I made progress cleaning the garage. And in the interest of not spreading false news, I will have to admit that this last example is currently hypothetical. It was a goal for February, it just didn't happen. These last years have made us all think a lot about who we are, who's in our closest circle around us, and who we truly want to invite into that circle by taking the risks of engagement and friendship. It's made us truly think of the world as a place where we need to cultivate our spiritual friends. Now, Kate Johnson tells the story of Buddha and his cousin and fellow monk, the Venerable Ananda. And Ananda says, "This is fully half of the holy life, Lord, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie." Jackson observes, Ananda probably thought this was a bold statement to make, provocative even. But the Buddha replies, "Don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of this holy life." Kate Johnson's book is called Radical Friendship, which she explains this way. "I use the term radical rather than spiritual to describe the friendship in the Metta Sutra because the word spiritual often conveys a sense of transcendent otherworldliness. Radical, by contrast, means of or relating to the roots. By radical friendship, I mean the kind of friendship that has the potential to heal us at the very ground of our being. Wounds from when we were young, maybe even wounds from before we were born. That kind of friendship that forges bonds so strong that systems of oppression can't break them. The kind of friendship that helps us gather ourselves and the world. In my mind," Kate writes, "radical friendship need not even be limited to the people we currently think of as friends. We can practice these principles with our neighbors and our colleagues, our children and our elders, the people we serve, and the people who serve us. Our people, as it turns out, are all around us. We find them by becoming the kind of friends that we ourselves would like to have." And again, I remind you that we find them by being that kind of friend to ourselves. So if you are here today with us, and I know there are people here today with us, I have been that person who is saying to yourself, "I am not sure where those circles are for me," then I would suggest that you start with your own heart. Kate Johnson experienced radical friendship with a bestie who was willing to tell her that even though she was a meditation teacher, because we all have flaws and our institutions all have flaws, she was drinking too much. That friend was still there when much later, Johnson remembered that comment and stopped her denial. Her words, "Radical friendship makes a practice of giving from the place where it stretches us just a little bit beyond our comfort zone. That sensation of stretch we may feel in the practice of generosity happens because whenever we give, we are always also giving something up. In radical friendship, we are giving up something of lesser value to receive something of greater value. For example, giving up material goods or other resources to be of service to the people we care about. And through doing it, we get to liberate ourselves from the tendency of the mind to cling in ways that ultimately cause suffering for ourselves and everyone else." Now, also last month, while I was on sabbatical, I did a lot of work around grieving and grief for a lot of reasons, but one was the anniversary of the tragic accidental death of one of my longest-term spiritual friends. True to the Buddha's conditions on friendship, Jean and I said hard things to each other even when we weren't quite ready to hear them, and yet we never stopped loving each other. And like Kate Johnson's friend, she was still there when many years after she had pointed out a really hard truth to me, I saw it for myself, and my whole world sort of started crashing down. We clashed sometimes, and we also were there for each other. We understood one another's joy and wins too, because we had traveled through life and experience together, not day to day, and yet always there, a phone call or a text or a Zoom call away. "Close your eyes and think of me, and soon I will be there," Carole King wrote. And the truth I now know, especially after my 3 days on the top of that mountain, is that with deep friendships, death does not stop that connection. Yet having a friend taken without warning, and in my case several in the last years, has made me realize that so often we don't take the time for the kind of friendship that this reading Rodney shared speaks to. Too often we are too busy to really give friendship the time it needs, like that cup that's too full that the turkey talked about. We don't pay attention, we don't take the risk because life has hurt us and we have been betrayed. And after being hurt, solitude is a resting place, and a connection might look different for every person. And yet, in a world that gives us a daily dose of despair, we also still need to consider how much time and effort, how many risk dollars, if you will, we spend on the precious and beneficial strengthening of friendship. I, for one, now make friendship one of my top priorities. Johnson also believes that friendships of this kind hold the best hope for helping us face what is too hard for us to face alone, and to find the courage to do together the small things we can. A justice maker and a multiracial woman who the world reads as Black, she says friendship can liberate us from racism and other biases. Strangers are not likely to have a conversation where they can help one another bridge some of the great divisions, for example, around ideology that we have in this nation, she notes. And families often can't do it because it's too close. But friendship, with the kind of rigor that the Buddha prescribed, sometimes can. Radical, spiritual friendship. Which is why we need to practice it as we can. And here is perhaps one of the most important things we can do. We can remember to form those deep and meaningful connections that give us sustenance when we have our first sonogram, or when we get up from a multi-hour session assembling something only to discover that there's one more piece that we were sitting on. Or when we make our first big career achievement, or when we hear a story on the news that just makes us restless and sleepless with concern. Having people in our lives who know us and can hear us in the moment makes all the difference. It happens when we develop, despite setbacks and falling short, better skills around prioritizing being present and listening from a place of beginner's mind to our friends. Now, 2 weekends from now, starting at about 4, we're going to have an event here that has been renamed the Fellowship Event, because it's not as much about dinner as it is about making new connections. We will have food. We'll be sharing food with each other. Watch for the details. But though we've been glad to gather as we could in these last years, we haven't truly had the chance to get to know one another as a new community, the community we are today in 2023. And there are so many wonderful people who have come into this community that many people who were already here haven't had a chance to meet. And there are so many wonderful people who have been in this community, like those standing stones, maybe not quite that long, who those new people haven't had a chance to meet. So it's going to be wonderful, and we really hope you will mark it on your calendar and participate, or even host a table. Janice Davis will be glad to talk to you, because it's important to be together. We'll do some other things, we'll honor people we need to honor, we'll express gratitude that we need to express, and mostly we will focus on meaningful connection and conversation. For as gathering designer Priya Parker says, people have to take chances in order to do something extraordinary. You know, maybe the word radical, going down to its roots, is a little overused in our time. However, it is radical. To take a risk in a world that seems to encourage us to burrow deeper and deeper into false securities and comforts and the seductions of isolation, which I will really look forward to talking to on that other Sunday when we speak about solitude, which is different from isolation. This community is rising again into a new form at this new time, and one of our levens will most certainly be the friendships we form and the ones we have already formed. So let us go about this blessed challenge with deep gladness of heart.